Which country does this flag belong to? Senegal, Japan, Mauritania, Mali. Senegal. Which country does this flag belong to? Australia, Myanmar, Bangladesh, Armenia. Myanmar. Which country does this flag belong to? Zambia, China, Turkmenistan, Kazakhstan. China. Which country does this flag belong to? Trinidad and Tobago, Malaysia, Georgia, Rwanda. Trinidad and Tobago. Which country does this flag belong to? Uruguay, Bulgaria, Jamaica, Trinidad and Tobago. Uruguay. Which country does this flag belong to? Djibouti, Yemen, Haiti, Brazil. Haiti. Which country does this flag belong to? Bulgaria, Libya, Slovakia, Chile. Chile. Which country does this flag belong to? Ethiopia, Chile, United Kingdom, Haiti. Ethiopia. Which country does this flag belong to? Tunisia, Taiwan, Tajikistan, North Korea. Tunisia. Which country does this flag belong to? Suriname, Norway, Poland, Maldives. Norway. Which country does this flag belong to? Timor-Leste, Congo, Ukraine, Lithuania. Congo. Which country does this flag belong to? Papua New Guinea, Tunisia, Niger, Venezuela. Venezuela. Which country does this flag belong to? Albania, Laos, Djibouti, Mongolia. Laos. Which country does this flag belong to? Ghana, Chile, New Zealand, Timor-Leste. Timor-Leste. Which country does this flag belong to? Philippines, Somalia, Liechtenstein, Algeria. Philippines. Which country does this flag belong to? Lithuania, Jamaica, Cuba, Afghanistan. Afghanistan. Which country does this flag belong to? Albania, Gambia, Liechtenstein, Hungary. Albania. Which country does this flag belong to? Rwanda, Czech Republic, Turkey, France. France. Which country does this flag belong to? Yemen, Haiti, France, Iceland. Yemen. Which country does this flag belong to? Lesotho, Estonia, Grenada, Mauritania. Estonia. Which country does this flag belong to? Honduras, Albania, Uzbekistan, Angola. Angola. Which country does this flag belong to? Bahamas, Colombia, Tajikistan, Guyana. Colombia. Which country does this flag belong to? Equatorial Guinea, Philippines, Slovenia, Thailand. Slovenia. Which country does this flag belong to? North Macedonia, Italy, Afghanistan, Israel. North Macedonia. Which country does this flag belong to? Mauritania, Bolivia, Italy, Portugal. Italy. Which country does this flag belong to? Timor-Leste, Netherlands, Somalia, Pakistan. Pakistan. Which country does this flag belong to? Djibouti, Bahamas, Paraguay, Finland. Finland. Which country does this flag belong to? United Arab Emirates, Qatar, Costa Rica, Sweden. Qatar. Which country does this flag belong to? Morocco, North Korea, Japan, Montenegro. Japan. Which country does this flag belong to? Greece, Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, New Zealand. Greece. Which country does this flag belong to? Chad, Honduras, Kuwait, Libya. Chad. Which country does this flag belong to? Norway, Philippines, Brazil, South Africa. South Africa. Which country does this flag belong to? South Korea, Botswana, Romania, Tajikistan. Romania. Which country does this flag belong to? Mongolia, Jamaica, United States, Portugal. United States. Which country does this flag belong to? Sri Lanka, Kuwait, Costa Rica, Jordan. Jordan. Which country does this flag belong to? Luxembourg, Slovakia, Liechtenstein, Denmark. Slovakia. Which country does this flag belong to? Tajikistan, Egypt, Zambia, Senegal. Egypt. Which country does this flag belong to? Namibia, Chile, Turkmenistan, Czech Republic. Namibia. Which country does this flag belong to? Burkina Faso, North Macedonia, Liberia, Cuba. Cuba. Which country does this flag belong to? North Korea, Jordan, Ireland, Nicaragua. Nicaragua. Which country does this flag belong to? Greece, Austria, Egypt, Netherlands. Austria. Which country does this flag belong to? Liechtenstein, Chile, Philippines, Paraguay. Liechtenstein. Which country does this flag belong to? Trinidad and Tobago, Barbados, Mozambique, Niger. Mozambique. Which country does this flag belong to? Botswana, Mauritania, Guinea-Bissau, Bosnia and Herzegovina. Guinea-Bissau. Which country does this flag belong to? Malaysia, Uruguay, Cameroon, Tajikistan. Malaysia. Which country does this flag belong to? Tanzania, Libya, Burundi, Ukraine. Libya. Which country does this flag belong to? Libya, Sri Lanka, Brazil, Romania. Brazil. Which country does this flag belong to? Djibouti, Papua New Guinea, Namibia, Uganda. Djibouti. Which country does this flag belong to? Cameroon, Papua New Guinea, Monaco, Cyprus. Cyprus. Which country does this flag belong to? Tajikistan, North Korea, Hungary, China. North Korea. Which country does this flag belong to? Tanzania, Jamaica, Burundi, Monaco. Monaco. Which country does this flag belong to? Luxembourg, Paraguay, Pakistan, South Sudan. Luxembourg. Which country does this flag belong to? Costa Rica, Hungary, Niger, Angola. Hungary. Which country does this flag belong to? Sudan, Serbia, Bahrain, India. Bahrain. Which country does this flag belong to? Finland, Lesotho, Lebanon, Israel. Israel. Which country does this flag belong to? Uzbekistan, Ecuador, Oman, Dominican Republic. Oman. Which country does this flag belong to? New Zealand, Liechtenstein, Denmark, France, Denmark. Which country does this flag belong to? Lithuania, Cyprus, Armenia, Laos. Armenia. Which country does this flag belong to? Armenia, Belarus, Peru, Netherlands. Belarus. Which country does this flag belong to? Rwanda, Guyana, Serbia, Greece. Serbia. Which country does this flag belong to? Austria, Bhutan, Monaco, Guinea. Bhutan. Which country does this flag belong to? Jordan, Egypt, Benin, India. Benin. Which country does this flag belong to? Benin, Italy, Mongolia, Bahamas. Mongolia. Which country does this flag belong to? Bosnia and Herzegovina, Israel, Argentina, Ireland. Argentina. Which country does this flag belong to? Romania, Lebanon, Algeria, Cyprus. Lebanon. Which country does this flag belong to? Kuwait, United Arab Emirates, Canada, Papua New Guinea. Canada. Which country does this flag belong to? Taiwan, Ireland, Georgia, India. Taiwan. Which country does this flag belong to? Kuwait, Belize, Cyprus, Morocco. Kuwait. Which country does this flag belong to? Venezuela, Papua New Guinea, Ghana, Poland. Papua New Guinea. Which country does this flag belong to? Uzbekistan, Guinea-Bissau, Panama, Tanzania. Panama. Which country does this flag belong to? Mexico, Fiji, China, Argentina. Fiji. Which country does this flag belong to? Hungary, Ireland, Guinea, Niger. Ireland. Which country does this flag belong to? Sweden, Moldova, Turkmenistan, Qatar. Sweden. Which country does this flag belong to? Congo, United States, Botswana, Bulgaria. Botswana. Which country does this flag belong to? Argentina, Iraq, Mali, Togo. Mali. Which country does this flag belong to? Latvia, Trinidad and Tobago, Bahrain, Italy. Latvia. Which country does this flag belong to? Indonesia, Yemen, Kyrgyzstan, India. India. Which country does this flag belong to? Guinea-Bissau, Togo, Spain, Australia. Togo. Which country does this flag belong to? Singapore, United Kingdom, Cuba, Netherlands. Netherlands. Which country does this flag belong to? Moldova, Poland, Italy, United Arab Emirates. United Arab Emirates. Which country does this flag belong to? Germany, Sudan, Belgium, Bahamas. Bahamas. Which country does this flag belong to? Singapore, Saudi Arabia, Colombia, Ghana. Saudi Arabia. Which country does this flag belong to? Tunisia, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, Tajikistan. Sri Lanka. Which country does this flag belong to? Morocco, Ukraine, Dominican Republic, Iceland. Dominican Republic. Which country does this flag belong to? Mozambique, Gambia, Ukraine, Somalia. Somalia. Which country does this flag belong to? Montenegro, Cameroon, Lebanon, Trinidad and Tobago. Cameroon. Which country does this flag belong to? Guyana, Serbia, Mozambique, Sierra Leone. Sierra Leone. Which country does this flag belong to? Equatorial Guinea, Jamaica, Grenada, Sri Lanka. Grenada. Which country does this flag belong to? Poland, Denmark, Finland, Syria. Syria. Which country does this flag belong to? Angola, Madagascar, Poland, Ecuador. Poland. Which country does this flag belong to? Turkmenistan, Indonesia, Uganda, Bolivia. Turkmenistan. Which country does this flag belong to? Slovenia, Indonesia, Djibouti, Georgia. Georgia. Which country does this flag belong to? Burkina Faso, Equatorial Guinea, Monaco, Colombia. Equatorial Guinea. Which country does this flag belong to? Georgia, Kenya, Russia, Rwanda. Russia. Which country does this flag belong to? Bhutan, China, Suriname, Denmark. Suriname. Which country does this flag belong to? Vietnam, Kazakhstan, Niger, Yemen. Niger. Which country does this flag belong to? Kenya, El Salvador, Netherlands, Austria. Kenya. Which country does this flag belong to? Mexico, United Kingdom, Algeria, Laos. Algeria. Which country does this flag belong to? Georgia, Haiti, Nepal, Iraq. Iraq. Which country does this flag belong to? Cyprus, Croatia, Uganda, Nicaragua. Uganda. Which country does this flag belong to? Ecuador, Ukraine, Iran, Croatia. Ukraine. Which country does this flag belong to? Sudan, Cameroon, Germany, Madagascar. Germany. Which country does this flag belong to? Jamaica, Zimbabwe, Cambodia, Slovenia. Zimbabwe. Which country does this flag belong to? Sudan, Peru, Cyprus, Cuba. Peru. Which country does this flag belong to? Czech Republic, Nigeria, Brunei, Togo. Nigeria. Which country does this flag belong to? Japan, Bangladesh, North Macedonia, Croatia. Croatia. Which country does this flag belong to? Mozambique, Benin, China, Morocco. Morocco. Which country does this flag belong to? Panama, Andorra, Azerbaijan, Ghana. Azerbaijan. Which country does this flag belong to? Montenegro, Qatar, Grenada, Serbia. Montenegro. Which country does this flag belong to? Turkey, Israel, Guyana, Kazakhstan. Turkey. Which country does this flag belong to? Benin, South Africa, Mauritania, Jamaica. Jamaica. Which country does this flag belong to? Mozambique, Czech Republic, Uganda, Bahamas. Czech Republic. Which country does this flag belong to? Papua New Guinea, Niger, Malta, Maldives. Malta. Which country does this flag belong to? Lesotho, Spain, United States, El Salvador. Spain. Which country does this flag belong to? Paraguay, Peru, Sweden, Philippines. Paraguay. Which country does this flag belong to? Mauritania, Libya, Turkey, India. Mauritania. Which country does this flag belong to? Gambia, Peru, South Africa, Uzbekistan. Uzbekistan. Which country does this flag belong to? Bangladesh, Netherlands, Belize, Nepal. Bangladesh. Which country does this flag belong to? Liberia, Serbia, Albania, Jordan. Liberia. Which country does this flag belong to? Burundi, Sudan, Botswana, Bosnia and Herzegovina. Burundi. Which country does this flag belong to? Iran, Nicaragua, Uganda, Andorra. Iran. Which country does this flag belong to? Czech Republic, Rwanda, Mali, Azerbaijan. Rwanda. Which country does this flag belong to? Kenya, Guinea, El Salvador, Spain. Guinea. Which country does this flag belong to? Panama, Vietnam, Ireland, Grenada. Vietnam. Which country does this flag belong to? Iran, Paraguay, Bulgaria, Belize. Bulgaria. Which country does this flag belong to? Algeria, Uganda, Hungary, El Salvador. El Salvador. Which country does this flag belong to? Egypt, South Africa, Russia, Honduras. Honduras. Which country does this flag belong to? Uzbekistan, Burundi, Burkina Faso, Botswana. Burkina Faso. Which country does this flag belong to? Indonesia, South Korea, Liechtenstein, Greece. Indonesia. Which country does this flag belong to? Argentina, Maldives, Kyrgyzstan, Bahrain. Kyrgyzstan. Which country does this flag belong to? United Kingdom, Belarus, Algeria, Angola. United Kingdom. Which country does this flag belong to? Russia, Haiti, Eritrea, Ukraine. Eritrea. Which country does this flag belong to? Costa Rica, Moldova, Morocco, Lithuania. Lithuania. Which country does this flag belong to? Chad, Nepal, Moldova, Burundi. Moldova. Which country does this flag belong to? Gabon, Singapore, Iraq, Equatorial Guinea. Singapore. Which country does this flag belong to? Portugal, Guyana, Bhutan, South Korea. Portugal. Which country does this flag belong to? Malawi, Moldova, Latvia, Guyana. Malawi. Which country does this flag belong to? Slovenia, Belgium, Russia, Belize. Belgium. Which country does this flag belong to? Venezuela, Australia, Cambodia, United Arab Emirates. Australia. Which country does this flag belong to? Iceland, Albania, Norway, Guyana. Guyana. Which country does this flag belong to? Somalia, Tanzania, India, Iceland. Iceland. Which country does this flag belong to? Switzerland, Albania, Kazakhstan, Brunei. Brunei. Which country does this flag belong to? Slovenia, Japan, Romania, South Korea. South Korea. Which country does this flag belong to? Maldives, Zambia, Fiji, El Salvador. Zambia. Which country does this flag belong to? Madagascar, Ireland, Albania, Liberia. Madagascar. Which country does this flag belong to? South Korea, Central African Republic, Eritrea, Botswana. Central African Republic. Which country does this flag belong to? Kenya, Fiji, Bolivia, Tajikistan. Tajikistan. Which country does this flag belong to? Gabon, Netherlands, Namibia, Mongolia. Gabon. Which country does this flag belong to? Ukraine, Eritrea, New Zealand, Ecuador. Ecuador. Which country does this flag belong to? Kazakhstan, Croatia, Guinea-Bissau, Guyana. Kazakhstan. Which country does this flag belong to? Algeria, Bulgaria, Colombia, Bosnia and Herzegovina. Bosnia and Herzegovina. Which country does this flag belong to? Switzerland, Sudan, Barbados, Rwanda. Barbados. Which country does this flag belong to? Albania, Tanzania, Somalia, Dominican Republic. Tanzania. Which country does this flag belong to? Costa Rica, Cameroon, Belarus, Myanmar. Costa Rica. Which country does this flag belong to? Armenia, Tanzania, Taiwan, Ghana. Ghana. Which country does this flag belong to? Maldives, Slovenia, Liberia, Tunisia. Maldives. Which country does this flag belong to? Cambodia, Slovakia, Monaco, Colombia. Cambodia. Which country does this flag belong to? Romania, Thailand, Djibouti, Mexico. Thailand. Which country does this flag belong to? Sudan, Monaco, Andorra, Kazakhstan. Sudan. Which country does this flag belong to? Algeria, Libya, Moldova, New Zealand. New Zealand. Which country does this flag belong to? Thailand, Costa Rica, Switzerland, Somalia. Switzerland. Which country does this flag belong to? Barbados, Cameroon, South Sudan, Spain. South Sudan. Which country does this flag belong to? Guatemala, Belgium, Liechtenstein, Slovakia. Guatemala. Which country does this flag belong to? Ghana, Tajikistan, Mexico, Malawi. Mexico. Which country does this flag belong to? Guinea, Morocco, Bolivia, Russia. Bolivia. Which country does this flag belong to? Eritrea, Belize, Suriname, Nepal. Belize. Which country does this flag belong to? Togo, Lesotho, Uzbekistan, Australia. Lesotho. Which country does this flag belong to? Thailand, Burundi, Spain, Gambia. Gambia. Which country does this flag belong to? Hungary, Andorra, Denmark, Myanmar. Andorra. Which country does this flag belong to? Senegal, Cambodia, Costa Rica, Nepal. Nepal.